She agreed to pretend to be the boss's girlfriend, but things quickly got out of control. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The New York sky was turning shades of orange as the day drew to a close, and Cole Harrington was still reviewing spreadsheets on the 29th floor of Harrington Capital, one of the most influential investment firms on the East Coast. The glass reflected the vibrant city below, but Cole's attention wasn't on the skyscrapers or the lights slowly coming to life. His world revolved around numbers, contracts, and surgical decisions. And in recent years, anything without a clear purpose had been discarded. At 36, he had inherited the family empire after his father's untimely death and turned an already solid fortune into a thriving empire. His reputation was flawless, discreet, methodical, inflexible, and completely alone. The call from his mother broke his calculated focus. Eleanor, with that gentle but firm tone that blended affection and insistence, reminded him of the upcoming celebration for her and his father's 40th wedding anniversary. And with the reminder came the inevitable question, just like every year, "Are you bringing someone dear?" Cole didn't answer right away. The silence on the line said enough, and Eleanor followed up with a touch of irony he knew all too well. "Just don't tell me you're showing up alone again." She hung up immediately, leaving no room for a refusal. The next morning, over coffee with his sister Grace, he casually mentioned the call. Grace, ever pragmatic, offered a blunt suggestion. Bring someone. Doesn't have to be real, just has to look the part. The idea lingered in his mind as he headed to a meeting with the administrative team. When Ava Bennett walked into the room with a folder of contracts in her hands, he couldn't say if it was impulse or logic, but something told him he had just found a potential solution. Ava had been his executive assistant for nearly 4 years. Discreet, efficient, and completely reliable. She had never given the slightest hint of wanting anything beyond the professional, which likely explained her steady presence in a world filled with constant pressure and turnover. He asked her to wait until the meeting was over. When everyone had left, he called her in for a private conversation. With his elbows on the table and a serious expression, he explained what he needed: a date for the weekend in Greenwich, where the family event would be held. Nothing personal, nothing beyond appearances, just a formal companion. Ava thought she had misunderstood. She repeated the phrase, as if waiting for a different explanation. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" Cole nodded, as though there was nothing unusual about it. "It's just for the weekend. You know my schedule, how I operate. I trust you more than anyone else." She stared at him, a mix of disbelief and discomfort in her eyes. It wasn't the kind of proposal one expected in a workplace, especially from a boss known for being untouchable. But he wasn't joking, and that made it even harder to say no. That night, in the small apartment she shared with her younger brother, Ava tried to rationalize the situation. Ben, an engineering student, had lost his scholarship due to a medical issue and was at risk of dropping out of school. Bills were piling up, and despite her relentless dedication to work, Ava couldn't keep up on her own. Cole's offer, generous compensation, and 2 weeks of paid leave stopped sounding absurd and started to feel like an uncomfortable but necessary opportunity. The next morning, she walked into Cole's office with a determined expression. "I'll do it, but under clear conditions." She laid it all out. No physical contact without consent, absolute confidentiality, and half the payment up front. Cole listened without interrupting, nodded calmly, and finished with a discreet but unmistakable smile of relief. Deal. They left on Friday afternoon in a black sedan driven by a family chauffeur. Their destination was the Harrington estate on the outskirts of Greenwich, a colonial mansion surrounded by meticulously landscaped gardens and century-old trees. During the drive, Ava tried to maintain her usual composure, but the roles had already shifted. It was impossible to ignore the intimate nature of the weekend ahead. Cole seemed more relaxed than he ever was at work. He shared stories from his teenage years, talked about the older brother who had left the country, and the grandfather who had taught him the value of staying in control, no matter the situation. In return, Ava spoke of her mother, a pianist who had died when she was still a teenager, and about the daily struggle she had faced since then to keep her and her brother's lives on track. Together, they crafted a convincing backstory. They had grown close after years of working together, started quietly dating 8 months ago, and were now in a comfortable phase of the relationship. Ava jotted down key details, memorized fake dates, invented shared memories, even came up with plausible nicknames. Cole remained silent for a moment, then said, "You know me better than anyone, Ava." She didn't respond. The sentence said more about him than it did about her. When they arrived at the estate, the gate opened automatically. The mansion was surrounded by guest cars, and the scent of freshly watered flowers lingered in the air. Ava tightened her grip on her bag and stepped toward the house. The car slowed as it approached the grand entrance of the Harrington estate, revealing, between the white columns and the mansion's perfectly symmetrical facade, the scale of the world Ava was about to step into. It was the kind of place that looked almost staged in its perfection. Tall windows with sheer linen curtains, lawns without a single leaf out of place, stone planters filled with freshly planted lavender. A man in a dark suit stood waiting by the marble staircase that led up to the main hall, and he opened the door so Ava and Cole could get out. Cole glanced at her before stepping out. Last chance to back out. Ava forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We've come too far." As she stepped onto the perfectly leveled gravel path, she felt eyes watching her from one of the windows. The performance was about to begin. The door opened before they even rang the bell. A poised woman with neatly pinned gray hair appeared with a smile Ava couldn't immediately decipher. Eleanor Harrington descended the steps with the grace of someone used to being in control and embraced her son naturally. Finally, then she turned to Ava with a sharp, assessing look. "And you brought company this time." Cole casually slipped an arm around Ava's waist. "Mother, this is Ava Bennett, my girlfriend." The word was spoken firmly. Eleanor extended her hand. "Welcome, dear." Her tone was polite, but layered with expectation. Ava shook the matriarch's hand discreetly. "Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you." And from that first exchange, she knew every move she made would be scrutinized under a magnifying glass. As they entered the house, Ava needed a few seconds to take it all in. The hall was expansive, with an imposing chandelier in the center and curved lightwood staircases leading up to the second floor. Oil portraits adorned the walls, depicting generations of the Harrington family in formal poses and iconic settings. From the other end of the hall, voices suggested that part of the family had already gathered in the main sitting room. Richard Harrington, the family patriarch, stood up as soon as he saw the couple approaching. Tall, lean, and with neatly combed silver hair, he exuded authority without needing to say a word. He shook Cole's hand and then Ava's, studying her with cool eyes. "Welcome." Ava held her smile. "Thank you. The house is beautiful." It was the kind of neutral remark that would fit any setting, safe enough to avoid early judgment. Soon after, Cole's sister appeared. Grace Harrington was blonde, vibrant, and immediately lightened the mood with a warm hug. "It's about time someone got my brother out of the office." Ava smiled, allowing herself to relax for a moment. "It was harder than it looks." Grace laughed loudly. "I believe it." The exchange helped ease the tension, but soon a more reserved figure approached. Andrew Harrington, Cole's brother, and his wife Natalie didn't seem as inclined toward levity. "How long have you been together?" Andrew asked, straight to the point. Cole answered with confidence. 8 months. Ava nodded silently. Natalie looked at her for a moment before remarking, "Funny. We never heard of you." Ava remained calm. "We kept things private in the beginning. We wanted to be sure before telling the family." Andrew leaned back on the couch, still watching. Discretion isn't always prudence. Sometimes it's just a polite way of hiding something. Cole stepped in with a subtle but firm tone. "Ava's always been private. That's one of the things I admire about her." The conversation was interrupted by Eleanor, who appeared with a drink in hand and announced that dinner would be served in 30 minutes. Cole offered Ava the chance to go upstairs and freshen up. "I'll show you the room." They climbed the impressive staircase together, and Eleanor followed with another piece of information. "I had the guest room next door prepared for Ava, but you're free to decide what you prefer." Cole didn't hesitate. "That won't be necessary. Ava's staying with me." Ava didn't show surprise, but she felt Eleanor's gaze lingering long enough to make a point. Once inside the bedroom, Cole locked the door and exhaled. First test done. Ava sat on the edge of the armchair near the window. "They're more direct than I expected." Cole chuckled softly. "They're rich, old-money New Yorkers. Direct is the bare minimum." The room was elegant, with dark furniture and heavy curtains. A king-size bed took center stage, with a wide sofa positioned near the bookshelf. Cole pointed to it. "You can take the bed. I'll sleep on the couch." Ava nodded. "That's fine." She spent a few minutes in the bathroom changing for dinner. She chose a wine-colored dress with a soft, flowing fabric, elegant without being over the top. She pinned back part of her hair and stepped out cautiously. When she returned to the room, she found Cole adjusting the cuffs of his shirt in front of the mirror. He turned when he saw her and paused for a few seconds. "You look beautiful." Ava nodded in quiet thanks. The tone was polite, but there was something more, just enough pause between his words and his next move, as if he wanted to hold on to the image a little longer. Ava noticed, but didn't comment. She just picked up her clutch and said, calmly, "Shall we?" They walked downstairs together, ready to face the next round of their act, still unaware of just how much truth had already slipped through the cracks. The Harringtons' dining room mirrored the same imposing elegance as the rest of the estate. High ceilings, beige linen curtains gently swaying with the breeze from the open windows, and a solid wood table stretching over 13 feet. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft golden glow over the porcelain plates and precisely aligned silverware. Ava sat beside Cole, adjusting her posture as she silently mapped the faces around her. Richard occupied the head of the table, with Eleanor to his left. At the opposite end, Andrew and Natalie maintained control of the atmosphere with subtle comments and watchful eyes. Grace, as always, was the only one who seemed at ease. She engaged everyone in conversation, cracked light jokes, and tried to dissipate the invisible tension that had hovered over the table since Ava's arrival. Still, the focus was unmistakably on the couple. Every word spoken by Ava or Cole was observed with more interest than the meal itself. Early into the appetizers, Richard raised his glass with the calm authority of someone who knows his words command attention. "Cole mentioned you've worked with him for years." Ava nodded with a slight smile. 3 years. Richard raised an eyebrow, maintaining a neutral tone. "And only now you've become a couple?" Cole interjected naturally. "Our professional relationship built a solid foundation. Over time, admiration evolved into something more." Ava added, her voice firm but not rigid. "There was always respect. Only when we were certain it wouldn't compromise the work environment did we decide to acknowledge our feelings." The explanation sounded rehearsed, but there was enough sincerity in their glances to make it believable. Eleanor held her glass near her lips for a few seconds before commenting, "You two seem aligned." The pause before the final word did not go unnoticed. The conversation meandered into lighter topics. Remarks about the evening's wines, the estate's gardens, and the guests expected at the main celebration the following day. Grace spoke about a charity event she had attended the previous week, and Natalie seized the opportunity to list the organization's missteps. But soon, the focus returned to the couple. "So, how was your first official date?" Grace asked, her curiosity genuine. Ava responded lightly, recounting a narrative they had agreed upon in the car, a dinner at a restaurant near Central Park. Cole chimed in, mentioning that Ava had made him laugh like no one else had in a long time. The scene felt charming, realistic, and eased the atmosphere around the table. But the calm was short-lived. Andrew decided to probe. "And at the office? How do you manage a relationship in such a demanding corporate environment?" Ava straightened her shoulders. "We keep everything separate. There's no interference in professional decisions. And we avoid any unnecessary exposure." Cole followed with conviction. "Ava remains the most competent professional I've ever worked with. Our relationship doesn't change that." Natalie, who had remained in the background until then, leaned over her plate. "But it's uncommon. Workplace relationships often end badly." Ava remained composed. "I understand the concern, but we're not a typical couple. That's the difference." Her response was direct, almost sharp, but delivered with the serenity of someone accustomed to maintaining control. Grace masked a smile with a sip of wine. Richard observed everything in silence, absorbing each word as if evaluating risks in a long-term investment. As the dinner progressed, Cole began to reveal details about Ava that she hadn't expected him to notice. Her breakfast preferences, the way she furrowed her brow when analyzing contracts, her obsession with keeping her desk drawer perfectly organized. Ava was surprised. "You really pay attention." Cole smiled unabashed. "It's hard not to." That brief exchange prompted Grace to sigh audibly. "You know what this looks like? A couple already married and just hasn't realized it yet." Everyone laughed, except Natalie, who maintained a polite smile. Eleanor simply finished her glass without comment. For a few minutes, the mood genuinely felt lighter. But when discussing the preparations for the next day's celebration, Richard remarked, "It will be an important evening. We expect everyone to rise to the occasion." The statement, delivered without directly looking at Ava, sounded more like a warning than a wish. At the end of the meal, guests were invited to move to the adjacent lounge, where a lit fireplace and ambient music set the tone for the evening's conclusion. Cole and Ava walked together, but were intercepted by Andrew along the way. "You have a convincing story, but even the best stories are tested under pressure." Ava held his gaze. "We're ready for any test." Andrew didn't respond. He simply gave a slight nod and continued on. Seated on the sofa, Ava settled next to Cole and looked around. There, amidst works of art, antique books, and crystal glasses, she was no longer just an assistant playing a role. She was a woman being judged, analyzed, and perhaps gradually seen in a new light, even by him. The morning light filtered through the thick curtains of the room when Ava woke up, still feeling the tension from the night before. Cole was no longer in the room. The sofa where he had slept looked untouched, as if no one had ever lain there. For a moment, she wondered if he had left early to keep up appearances, or if he was simply the kind of man who retreats before the day fully awakens. She pulled a light sweater over her nightgown and opened the balcony door. Outside, the damp garden shimmered with the first rays of sun piercing through the tall trees of Greenwich. Cole was there, seated in one of the wicker chairs with a cup of coffee in hand and his tablet resting on his lap. When he noticed her presence, he turned slightly and gave a brief smile. "There's coffee. I got some for you too." Ava sat in the chair beside him, wrapping her hands around the steaming cup. The comforting heat of the drink contrasted with the chill in the morning air. They spoke little at first. They commented on the weather, the guest gathering plan for later, and even the type of wood used on the deck. Small talk to fill the space between comfort and caution. When silence settled again, Ava broke the rhythm. "You seem different here." Cole looked toward the horizon. "Here, I don't have to negotiate contracts or face market analysts." She studied his profile, more at ease, free from the usual rigidity of city life. "Have you ever thought about walking away from all of it?" He took a moment to answer. "Yes, but I wouldn't know where to begin. This is all I've ever known." Ava nodded, understanding without judgment. It was an unexpected confession. Cole was the kind of man who always seemed to have the answers, and now here he revealed spaces untouched by certainty or plans. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Eleanor appeared, already dressed for the family breakfast, her hair neatly pinned back, a light shawl over her shoulders. "We're going for a short walk around the property. Richard wants to show the vineyards. Are you coming?" Cole answered yes, and once she had stepped away, he turned to Ava. "She's watching. She'll draw conclusions from the smallest gestures." Ava finished her coffee calmly. She already has her opinion. She just hasn't said it out loud yet. The walk through the gardens turned out to be more pleasant than Ava had anticipated. Richard led the group with the enthusiasm of a proud host, sharing decades-old stories and memories that now served to entertain. Cole, walking beside Ava, remained attentive, occasionally placing a hand on her back, offering his arm along the less stable gravel paths. When the group scattered briefly, Cole guided Ava down a side path through the trees. They reached a clearing where an old wooden bench sat beneath a massive oak. He pointed to the trunk. "My father started this when he married my mother. Every year, he comes back and carves another heart with their initials." Ava studied the dozens of hearts etched into the bark, some faded with time. "They still do it?" Cole nodded. "Tonight, he'll carve another. It's tradition." Ava traced one of the marks with her fingers. "And you? Do you believe in that kind of love?" The question hung in the air for a few seconds. Cole gave a small shrug. "I used to think it was a bit much. But it's hard not to rethink things when you see something last 40 years. She kept her gaze on the trunk. "You talk about them with admiration, even though you're so different." Cole gave a quiet laugh. "Maybe that's exactly why." On the way back to the house, Ava felt torn. What had begun as a carefully scripted performance was slowly becoming something harder to manage. The gestures, the conversations, even the silences between her and Cole no longer felt strategic. She was seeing a side of him she hadn't known at the office, a man with memories, vulnerabilities, hesitations. As they climbed the stairs toward the rooms, Grace stopped Ava in the hallway. "Want some advice?" Ava nodded. "Don't underestimate my mother. She might seem cordial, but nothing escapes her. If you want to get through this unscathed, stay consistent. All the time." Ava thanked her and continued in silence. It was clear that the real test was still to come. At lunch, Cole was already waiting for her in the foyer with a relaxed expression. The tension from the night before seemed to have shifted into a kind of quiet complicity. When she appeared, he stood and adjusted her necklace gently. It was crooked. The gesture was quick, almost automatic, but intimate enough to make Eleanor, who was passing by, pause for a moment. Ava noticed, and her heart raced. That wasn't part of the script. It was just a necklace adjustment, but it said more than any rehearsed line. The afternoon carried on with music rehearsals, final touches on decorations, and a growing sense of anticipation for the big celebration that night. Ava changed in silence, watching her reflection in the mirror. She could no longer tell where the act ended and her real feelings began. The Harrington estate transformed as dusk fell. Support staff moved through the main halls, arranging floral centerpieces in shades of cream and moss green. placing candles in silver candelabras and aligning rows of chairs in the central ballroom with near-military precision. In the foyer, crates of champagne were being opened and porcelain dishes arranged neatly on long serving tables. The dinner celebrating Richard and Eleanor's 40-year marriage would bring together family friends, investors, socialites, and extended members of the Harrington clan. An event clearly designed to impress and, undoubtedly, to further test Ava's presence. Upstairs, she stood in front of the full-length mirror in their room. She wore a flowing black gown with a modest V neckline and a flawless fit. Her hair was down in soft waves, catching the light with a subtle sheen. The pearl necklace lent by Grace added the final touch. Ava applied a neutral shade of lipstick, took a deep breath, and tried to shake off the feeling that she was about to step onto a fully lit stage. A knock on the door preceded Cole's entrance. In a dark suit and a burgundy tie, his hair neatly styled, he looked every bit the businessman from a magazine cover. He paused when he saw her, saying nothing at first. Then, quietly, he said, "You look stunning." Ava gave him a gentle smile and nodded in thanks. They were about to head downstairs when Cole offered his arm. "Ready?" Ava hesitated for just a moment before taking it. They descended the main staircase together, feeling eyes gradually turn toward them with each step closer to the marble floor. Eleanor stood waiting in a sleek silver gown, her expression calculated. As they reached the final step, she stepped forward with a smile. "You both look perfect. The guests will love meeting you." The round of introductions began immediately. They were presented to old family friends, business associates who greeted Cole with ease, and relatives Ava could hardly keep track of. Cole kept his hand firmly at her waist, guiding her with practiced charm, leaning in now and then to whisper something light-hearted in her ear. Ava smiled, replied, engaged with composed poise. But inside, she felt every inch of that facade being stretched thin under the weight of sidelong glances and barely veiled remarks. One guest, noting the necklace, said, "Wasn't that Eleanor's? I think she wore it to her engagement dinner." Ava nodded respectfully, and Cole added, "She suggested Ava wear it. We thought it was a meaningful gesture." Eleanor, just a few feet away, didn't correct him. She simply watched. As the waitstaff passed around glasses and guests began taking their seats, Richard stepped onto a small platform with a microphone in hand. The golden lighting highlighted his strong features, and his voice, when it came, carried the authority of someone used to being heard. 40 years of marriage isn't about constant harmony. It's about daily commitment, about staying, even when leaving would be easier. The room fell into respectful silence. Tonight, we don't just celebrate our journey. We celebrate the legacy it leaves. And we hope our children find partnerships as strong as the one we've built. His gaze swept across the room, stopping briefly on Cole, then Ava, even those who've only recently revealed theirs. A murmur of soft laughter passed through the crowd. Cole remained composed, but Ava noticed his jaw tense slightly. When the toast ended and the music began, older couples opened the dance floor with a traditional waltz. Eleanor and Richard danced gracefully, clearly comfortable under scrutiny. Ava stood aside, watching, until Cole approached with his hand extended. "Shall we?" She hesitated. "You dance?" He smiled. "Trained since I was 12. Ava accepted. They walked together to the center of the ballroom and quickly became the new focus of attention. Cole led with confidence, their steps in sync, his hand resting firmly at her back. Ava concentrated on the movement, but couldn't ignore the way he looked at her. There was no role-playing, no audience. Just her and Cole, turning slowly to the music, connected by something neither of them could pretend away. When the dance ended, Ava felt breathless. They were standing closer than the choreography required, and Cole's eyes hadn't left hers. She whispered, "Everyone's watching." He replied softly, "I know." Then he leaned in, forehead nearly touching hers. Before anything more could happen, a waiter passed by with a tray. Ava gently stepped back, took a glass, and retreated to the edge of the room. Cole stood still for a moment, then moved off to greet another couple. Left alone for a brief moment, Ava tried to collect herself. It was supposed to be just a weekend, she reminded herself. But every look, every gesture, every word seemed to pull her further from the script they'd agreed upon. And she was beginning to fear that going back wouldn't be so simple. The evening carried on with quiet elegance. The Harrington estate still bustling with guests enjoying the soft melodies of a string quartet and delicate desserts served on fine porcelain. Ava stood near the wall of windows, her champagne glass barely touched, watching Cole engage in conversation with two older men by the fireplace. The feeling that what they were living had stretched far beyond the boundaries of their agreement was becoming harder to ignore. And before she could gather her thoughts, a subtle movement by the entrance caught her attention. A well-dressed man with a confident smile and a sharp gaze moved through the room like someone who already knew exactly where he was going. Ava froze inside. The past she had hoped to keep locked out of this weekend had just walked through the door. Ryan Calloway was unmistakable. Striking features, self-assured posture, and that tilted smile of someone who always believed he was one step ahead. Ava's hands trembled slightly, but she held her ground. He saw her and smiled. Not warmly, but with the kind of look that said, "I still know exactly who you are." Cole picked up on the subtle shift in Ava's expression and followed her gaze. When Ryan finally reached them, his tone was casual. "Ava Bennett." One unexpected surprise. Ava responded with measured calm. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" He glanced around, as if choosing his words for maximum effect. "A friend of Cole's cousin invited me. I didn't expect to find you in such fine company." His eyes moved to Cole. "You must be Cole Harrington. I've heard plenty." Cole kept a neutral expression. "And you are?" "Ryan Calloway. Ava and I used to work together." The statement was delivered with the calculated tone of someone who wanted to sound harmless, but was already casting bait. Ava crossed her arms casually. "It was a short phase." Ryan chuckled. "Depends on your perspective." The game was on. Cole extended his hand politely. "Pleasure." Ryan shook it firmly. Ava was always very dedicated. Glad to see her doing well. Ava stayed still. Discomfort settled around them, and a few discreet glances from nearby guests began to turn toward the trio. Cole broke the moment. "If you'll excuse us, we need to circulate." But Ryan didn't back down. "Of course. I just couldn't miss the chance to say hello to an old colleague. You two have quite the story." With a short nod, Ryan walked away. Ava exhaled deeply. Cole looked at her. "Ex." She nodded. "We worked together. Dated briefly. It was complicated." Cole didn't push. "Want to get out of here?" She shook her head. "No, I won't let him ruin this." They returned to the main hall, but the atmosphere had shifted. Curious looks had morphed into subtly judgmental ones. Eleanor noticed. She intercepted them in one of the hallways. "That man said your name quite intimately." "Everything all right, Ava?" Her voice was light, but her eyes weren't. Ava stayed composed. "We had a brief past. He showed up unexpectedly. I wasn't aware he'd be here." Eleanor tilted her head slightly. "I see. Just stay focused. Tonight is important for all of us." And with that, she walked on. Later, Cole and Ava stepped away to the East Wing's hallway, where it was quieter. Ava leaned against the oak-paneled wall and closed her eyes for a few seconds. "Do you think anyone will find out?" Cole stood beside her, serious. "I think Ryan came here to plant doubt." She sighed. "You don't know how manipulative he is. When we ended things, he spread twisted stories about me at work. I had to start over somewhere new. Cole studied her more closely. You never told me that. Ava shrugged. Because it doesn't define me. Or at least it shouldn't. Cole stepped a bit closer. It doesn't. But explains why you keep so much to yourself. She met his eyes. I'm not good with closeness. That's why the deal felt easier. He didn't look away. Does it still feel that way? She didn't answer. The silence was enough. Cole reached for her hand. It wasn't a staged or public gesture. They were alone, hidden from the rest of the event, and he held her hand with quiet strength. No rush, no script. Ava didn't pull away. She stayed, eyes locked with his. Are you still in character, Cole? He shook his head. Haven't been for a while. Ava let out a long breath, as if releasing something she'd been holding in. Me neither. What followed wasn't a kiss or a bold touch. It was just stillness. Two people standing close enough to feel something undeniable, but not quite ready to cross the line. The night wasn't over, and more tests surely lay ahead. But in that moment, no agreement, no facade, no plan could hold back what had already begun to form between them. The atmosphere in the mansion had shifted, not because of any official announcement or open confession, but through the subtle changes in the way people looked, in the conversations that fell silent mid-sentence when Ava or Cole walked by, and in the careful tone now used when mentioning their names. Ryan's presence, though he hadn't caused a scene, had been enough to stir questions among the guests. When Ava came down for the informal brunch served in the garden, she could already feel it. Handshakes that lingered too long, polite smiles from people unsure of what to think. Grace tried to mask the tension by pulling Ava aside to talk about the floral arrangements, but even that conversation inevitably circled back to the previous night. Did Ryan say something I should know? Grace asked in a low voice, genuinely concerned but trying not to pry. Ava met her eyes directly. He did what he does best. He planted doubt. Across the garden, Cole was speaking with Richard and Eleanor. His stance was still steady, but the slight tension in his shoulders betrayed that he too felt the pressure mounting. When their eyes met, a subtle nod passed between him and Ava. She knew right then that the morning would require more than diplomacy, more than practiced gestures. Minutes later, Eleanor invited the two of them to a conversation in the library. The room, lined with dark wood bookshelves, smelled of old books and tradition. Richard was already seated. Andrew joined shortly after. It felt like a family board meeting had been called. Eleanor didn't waste time. We believe you owe us an explanation. Ava remained standing, hands clasped in front of her. Cole was the first to speak. If this is about Ryan, he's part of her past. A past that concerns no one but her. Andrew interrupted. It's not about the ex. It's about the fact that we heard more about your relationship from a stranger than from either of you. Ava felt her cheeks flush but kept her composure. We didn't realize we needed validation. Eleanor crossed her legs gracefully. It's not validation, Ava. It's clarity. Anyone entering this family, even temporarily, needs to know what they're stepping into. Richard spoke next, his tone calmer. The problem, Cole, is that you've always been too private. You never introduced anyone. And now you bring someone everyone knows as your assistant. It feels unusual. Cole didn't hesitate. Ava has been by my side for years. She held the company together when no one else could. If I have enough stability today to be here, she's a big reason why. Eleanor's face remained unreadable. How long have you been together again? Ava answered, 8 months. Her voice was steady, but the air in the room was thick with skepticism. Andrew shook his head. There are inconsistencies, and Ryan raising any doubt has already created a problem. Cole stood. This wasn't supposed to escalate like this, but maybe I need to be honest with you now. He didn't sugarcoat it. I asked Ava to pretend to be my girlfriend for the weekend. I didn't want to deal with family pressure. I needed someone I trusted, and I trust her more than anyone. The tension in the room tightened. Andrew exhaled sharply, like he'd just proven a point. Eleanor didn't flinch. Richard lowered his gaze. But before any judgment could be formalized, Cole continued, his tone softer. I understand the weight of what we did, and I'm truly sorry for dragging everyone into something that should have been handled more directly. The responsibility is mine. There was a pause, and then Ava stepped forward, her voice firm. I'm sorry too, not for agreeing, but for thinking it would be simple. If the family wants to continue this conversation, I'll be available. But what's personal between me and Cole belongs to us. What they receive in return wasn't approval, but it wasn't rejection either. Richard stood. You've caused quite a stir. But maybe, in the end, you're just two adults trying to figure things out. I hope you know what you're doing. Eleanor rose next. The party isn't over. And now, more than ever, everyone will be watching. Andrew left last, saying nothing. When the door closed, Cole turned to Ava. If you want to leave now, I'll understand. But she shook her head. I don't want to leave, and I don't want to keep pretending either. Cole took a deep breath. Then, we moved forward. With the truth. Ava nodded. They walked out of the library side by side. Not as co-conspirators in a lie, but as two people who had finally admitted they were more involved than they had realized. The night arrived under a clear sky, the air still thick with the emotions of the day. After the conversation in the library, Ava and Cole didn't return straight to the reception. They mingled quietly among the remaining guests, their demeanor polite but restrained. There was no more need to prove anything, and yet everything seemed suspended in the air. Once the final toast had been made and the oldest guests began to leave, Ava slipped upstairs alone. She needed a few minutes to herself to sort through the whirlwind of emotions that had built up since the confession. She took off her dress, washed her face, and tied her hair up loosely. She was wearing a light blouse and cotton pants when a knock came at the door. It was Cole. He entered slowly, saying nothing. He simply sat in the armchair by the window, elbows resting on his knees, eyes on the floor for a long moment. Ava, still standing, waited for him to speak first. I think we crossed a line we can't come back from, he said. The sentence was simple, but it carried everything. Ava crossed her arms. I didn't expect this to be easy, but I also didn't think it would affect me so much. Cole lifted his eyes. What happened downstairs? I took the blame, because it was my idea, but I couldn't say what's really going on. She stepped closer. You shouldn't have. Some things don't belong in a room full of people waiting for answers that have nothing to do with feelings. Cole nodded. I didn't want to put you in the spotlight, but I also didn't want to keep pretending that you're just someone doing me a favor. Ava sat on the edge of the bed. You still don't know what you want, do you? He took his time before answering. I think I know what I don't want. I don't want to go back to before. I don't want you to leave thinking this was just a well-played performance. Ava looked down, and I don't want to walk away thinking I got caught up in an act that felt too real. The silence between them this time wasn't awkward. It was thick, heavy with a kind of honesty they were just beginning to name. You look different to me today, Cole said. When you stood up to my mother, when you stayed calm through it all. I saw someone who isn't just my assistant, not just someone I respect. I saw a woman I admire, and who, somehow, matters more to me than she probably should. Ava smiled faintly. You've always had a way with words, but I need more than that. He stepped closer and stopped in front of her. What do you need? Ava looked into his eyes. Honesty. No more scripts. If this is going to fall apart, let be real. And if it's going to work, we need to know what that means. Cole held out his hand. Do you want to try? Ava took it firmly. I want to understand what we're building. And for that, I'll stay. But no more rehearsals. He nodded. No more rehearsals. They stayed there, holding hands, long enough for words to no longer matter. When he pulled her into an embrace, Ava felt an unexpected sense of relief. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. Flawed, uncertain, but grounded in a kind of willingness that only exists when you choose to let go of control. Later, when everyone else had turned in and the house returned to its quiet rhythm, Ava and Cole stood on the balcony of the room, looking out at the starry night. They didn't say much. Sometimes he'd make a small comment about the guests, and sometimes she would answer with a nod or a look. But the essential had already been said. When they stepped back inside and drew the curtains, there was a kind of unspoken pact between them. From now on, every step would be taken without masks. There were no promises of the future, just a mutual desire. And for that moment, it was more than enough. The next morning arrived under a clear sky, and the mansion stood in silence, as if the weight of recent conversations had left a hush hanging over everything. Ava woke slowly, still lying in the guest room bed next to Cole's. There was no longer any doubt about what she felt, but a natural uncertainty remained about where it might lead them. As she stepped out of the room, she found Cole sitting on the sofa in the private lounge, reading something on his tablet. When he looked up and saw her, he offered a gentle smile. "Good morning," she responded with a soft nod, walking over. He closed the device and stood. "There's coffee in the kitchen." Grace stopped by earlier and set everything up. Ava thanked him and followed him into the sunlit kitchen, where the early light poured through open windows. They sat together at the counter, drinking their coffee slowly. After everything, the silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that builds intimacy. After a few minutes, Cole finally spoke. "If you want to go back to New York today, I'll understand." Ava looked at him. "Do you want me to go?" He shook his head. "I want you to stay, but I don't want you to feel tied to something that's still taking shape." Ava sighed softly. "We've already crossed the line, and despite everything that's happened, what's left is something I don't want to walk away from." Cole held his cup in both hands. "Neither do I." By late morning, they walked together through the grounds. The atmosphere no longer felt festive. It felt like closure. Teams were taking down decorations in the garden. The last of the guests were leaving notes with the staff, and the sound of luggage zipping shut filled the air with the signal that the weekend was truly ending. Cole and Ava paused beneath the old oak tree where the carved heart stood. Ava ran her fingers over one of the oldest engravings. "They started here, but it's not about how long, it's about what you build." Cole nodded, looking at her. "Are you saying we can still build something?" She turned to him. "I'm saying we're just beginning, and we need to decide if we have the courage to keep going." That afternoon, Grace appeared with 2 envelopes. "There's a casual meeting now, just with the foundation directors and a few longtime supporters. They want to see you both together, since your story's already circulated among the guests." Cole nodded. "All right." Ava's stomach flipped, but she took a deep breath. This wasn't new anymore. She knew where she stood. In the East Wing's sitting room, Grace and Eleanor were waiting, along with 2 longtime family associates. Eleanor got straight to the point. "We already know what this is about. What we want to understand is how you plan to handle the fallout." Cole didn't hesitate. "Together. What happened here is between us, and we'll deal with it without dragging the company or the family into it." Ava added, "I'll take full responsibility for my decisions, but I'd prefer if any matters regarding our relationship remain private." Eleanor nodded briefly. "As long as you're committed to discretion, accountability, and honesty, I see no reason to interfere." There was no pushback, no confrontation. The conversation ended with a nod and a reminder they would be watched. As they left, Ava turned to Cole. "Have you ever been this exposed before?" He shook his head. "Never." "You?" She gave a quiet laugh. "Me neither. But maybe this is what we needed to stop running." That night, They stayed on the suite's balcony, watching the sky darken. Cole made 2 cups of tea, handed one to Ava, and sat beside her. She rested her head on his shoulder. When this started, I had no idea where it would lead. He smiled, kissing the top of her head. Neither did I, but now I know this is exactly where I want to be. And there, in the comforting silence of a connection that no longer relied on roles or strategies, they stayed together. No rush, no masks, just 2 people slowly learning how to love each other. The next day, the sky was clear and the estate began returning to its usual rhythm. Cole and Ava had breakfast together in the glass room, without the previous tension. They talked about going back to New York, about the company, about what they would do with the space they had opened between them. "Let's take it slow," Ava said, touching his hand on the table. "But let's move forward." Cole nodded. "I won't ask anything of you. I just want to keep getting to know you outside the office." She smiled. Later, before they left, Grace found them at the entrance. "For what it's worth, you two seem to work. I don't know where it's headed, but I saw something real there." Ava hugged her tightly. "Thank you." In the car, on the way back to the city, Cole held Ava's hand in the back seat. The ride was calm, filled with short conversations and lingering glances. When they arrived at her building, Cole got out too. "Can I come up?" Ava hesitated for a second, then nodded. "You can." In the apartment, she dropped her bag on the couch and went to the kitchen to make coffee. Cole watched her. When she returned with 2 mugs, he pulled her close. "I've been thinking about something." Ava sat beside him. "What?" "How it all started with a performance. And yet, the truth that came out of it feels more right than anything else I've ever had." Ava looked at him for a few seconds. "Then let's take care of it. Let's give it time and space. But let's be honest. With each other. And with ourselves." Cole agreed. "We deserve that." In the weeks that followed, Ava returned to Harrington Capital, now as a special projects manager, in an independent role, but still connected to the company. At work, they kept things discreet, just as they had agreed. But outside of work, their connection grew stronger. Casual dinners, afternoons at her apartment, late-night talks on the balcony, where Cole met Ben, Ava's brother, and slowly became part of their routine without overstepping. Their romance blossomed in the little things: a note left on the table, a midday text, a glance that needed no explanation. They didn't rush. They made no grand promises. They just built something together. Grace brought them together whenever she could, and Eleanor, while keeping a bit of distance, accepted the new dynamics with a quiet tolerance that spoke louder than words. Gradually, Ava became a natural part of Cole's life. When they spent the night together, the intimacy was deep, their kisses and lovemaking filled with a focus that made the rest of the world disappear. She no longer had to hide her smile when he said he missed her or when he pressed his forehead against hers before leaving. Their love hadn't come from where they expected, but it grew in the space they created, in the day-to-day, in mutual admiration, in the kind of spontaneous affection that wasn't planned. And at the end of the day, when Ava rested her head on Cole's shoulder, there was no script, no doubt, no past holding them back. There was only the present they chose to live. The end. So, what did you think of this story? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to keep enjoying stories like this one. See you next time.